Training versus education. There's a lot of people that I've talked to that look at the two as if they are the same, training and education, but they're really dramatically different. If you look at education, it is a time-weighted knowledge base. As an example, in general, doctors complete a 4-year undergraduate program, spend 4 more years in medical school, and then complete 3 to 7 years of residency training before they are eligible for their medical licensing. Training, however, is competency weighted. Training should never have a timeline imposed on it because your goal for training is to determine that the person is competent in the task that you're teaching them. As an example, if somebody needs to be proven competent on the use of a forklift at your site, you will offer the training, but the training should not be a mandated 6 or 8 hours. Some students may pick it up quicker, some students may pick it up slower, but generally as soon as we start installing a time-weighted event onto training, we lose the effect of what good training is all about. I first started to look into the difference of education versus training because at one of the sites I worked at, we had a minor incident with a garbage can fire that required the use of a fire extinguisher. And what's interesting about this event is that the incident itself was very low risk, but it took a while and many fire extinguishers to put the fire out, and there was some chaos involved. When more than one fire extinguisher was used, they would have been able to extinguish the fire a lot quicker. Once doing a root cause analysis on the event, corrective actions were put into place. One of the corrective actions was we had to be able to determine competency with the use of the fire extinguisher for our personnel on site. Upon doing some research on the training competencies for fire extinguisher and programs that were existing, I found out that the fire extinguisher training was a basic 6-hour training program. And now I'm going to make most safety professionals cringe at this because I'm going to discuss with you the cost. And I know a lot of people out there will say that you should never put a price on safety, but at the end of the day, I look at it as a return on my investment. If I'm going to go take 6 hours worth of training, or I'm going to delegate a bunch of personnel to take the training, I want to know that it is a valuable 6 hours of training and that the people we're training are truly competent in the use of the fire extinguishers. And I also look at my stakeholders and their needs. If you truly want a safety program to flourish, you have to understand your stakeholders and what they need. And generally, as soon as you start looking at other stakeholders, they need production, quality, and cost. Not saying that those will degrade your safety program. In fact, that once you figure out who your stakeholders are and your shareholders, you will actually bolster your safety program because all of those are dramatically interlinked. So initially, the traditional fire extinguisher certification course, like I said, was 8 hours. The corrective action that we looked at stated that there was going to be 380 personnel that need to be involved in this corrective action. So if you look at it, a total of 2,280 workable hours needed to be utilized for this one part of the corrective action. And on average, we do $115 an hour per contractor. So the grand total for this would be $262,200 for this 6 hours worth of fire extinguisher training. And this is just simply the workable hours that are going to be used. This has nothing to do with the actual cost of the course. 380 people at approximately $180 each for the course equaled $68,400 to get 380 people certified through this course. On top of that, we had to look at the cost and charging spent for the fire extinguishers because once they were used in training, they needed to get refilled and recertified for the field. So basically, one fire extinguisher would be used for 2 training events. That would be a total of 190 refurbished fire extinguishers to complete the course for another $9,900 of cost on top of that, for the grand total of $340,600 to implement this corrective action. So as soon as you start looking at the cost, you can totally understand where your stakeholders are coming from, because this is a lot of money for a very simple corrective action. So before investing and moving forward with this corrective action, I went and took the fire extinguisher course to see what the return on investment was going to be. And the course was horrible. I would have rather chewed on tinfoil than actually complete the 6-hour training course. The hardest part about the course is that it was filled with filler. It did not need to be that long. And the filler itself was nothing that went towards deeming competency with the fire extinguisher. We learned about the history of a fire extinguisher, that they actually started with a chemical solution in glass jars that would throw on fires. We learned the history of the fire department, and a large amount of time was actually spent on the classifications of different fire extinguishers and recognizing them so that you can utilize the right extinguisher for the right type of fire. And all of these are filler, including the classifications of a fire extinguisher. Because if you think about it, every industrial site that's out there, especially in an oil and gas situation, we have professionals that have come on site to allocate specific fire extinguishers for specific areas. So if there is a fire in that area, the right fire extinguishers are in place. If we need to educate our personnel on the classifications of fire extinguishers on our work site, we have to ask ourselves, what are we trying to deem them competent for? We're deeming them competent for the use of the fire extinguisher. If we need them to know classifications and rules and regulations, maybe at that point we have to ask ourselves, are we trying to deem them competent as fire technicians for the fire safety program? On top of all this, I was actually quite shocked when I took the course because they lit a large pan that contained oil and diesel on fire and had us go about putting the fire out with the fire extinguisher. As soon as I saw this process, I started to formulate in my mind how long it would take to get the permits in place and what kind of resources we would need to have in place to do this training on site, considering we are an oil and gas refinery. Lighting a fire inside of a refinery is less desirable. With that, there's also a huge amount of environmental implication. We are going to be discharging 190 fire extinguishers. With that discharge, there's going to be a cleanup. The product may not be environmentally damaging, but the dust and everything else that's going to flow around after the training is going to affect machinery, it's going to affect people, and more than likely at the volume that we're using, there's going to be some level of environmental implication. It was then that I got involved with a local training company that was very progressive and very cutting edge, and I had worked with them closely before. When I approached them about my problem with the training of the fire extinguisher for our corrective action, we actually came forth with a plan to create an end-user fire extinguisher course. Part of this plan was to use cutting-edge technology that was in place by a large amount of fire departments in the United States, including the New York Fire Department. It is a digital screen that registers where the user's spraying the water onto the screen that is simulating a fire. So the fire extinguisher behaves exactly the same. It is pressurized water instead of a pressurized powder. But the beautiful part is that we have no environmental implications. The fire extinguishers can be recharged and refilled on site. And the controls that we had for the simulator would allow us to mimic several different types of fires and how they behave. Once we had the training device, we had to start looking at what do we truly need to do to train people to be competent with the fire extinguisher? And one of the major things that came up was the amount of stress that people were put under when a real fire was occurring. So that was the bulk of our training was, this is what the body does under stress. We're going to train you in a way that uses what Mother Nature gave us as stress triggers to allow us to perform better. We also educated the fact that multiple people can be used to put out a single fire. And when we did the scenario, we actually had scenarios where 2 or 3 or 4 people could come up and start using a fire extinguisher on a fire. And they, with the simulator, got to realize how quick that fire was put out. We also created a buddy system or a buddy check after the fire was put out. Because under extreme adrenaline, we lose our ability to feel pain. So we may have been burnt or hurt extinguishing the fire and not know it. Whereas underneath the old system of training, there was absolutely no buddy check. There was nothing in place to ensure that you were okay after the critical event. Following the rule of 3 philosophies, the course was 30 minutes in class and 30 minutes practical. We took a 6-hour in-class program and condensed it to 30 minutes in class and 30 minutes practical. In 4 days, we trained 380 people. And since we're really bad with numbers, this is what 380 actually looks like. We utilized only one workable hour for 380 people, which would total $43,700. The course itself was brought down to $25 a person because of the duration it takes to train people. The course came out to be $9,500. There was no environmental cost, no refurbishing costs, for a savings of $287,400 on one single corrective action. Almost $300,000 was able to be saved in workable hours and costs by looking at the difference between training and education. And at the end, they were certified competent. We had run very realistic scenarios where they would have to go retrieve the fire extinguisher from places that it was locked up, and then they would utilize a fire extinguisher to put the fire out, and then they did a buddy check. They were, in essence, competent for the use of the fire extinguisher. So how was it? What was this course like? Because it was very cutting edge. It was a pink cow on the site, and it was a great success. A year later, we ran a mock scenario on the site where we randomly selected people that had taken this 1 hour end user competency fire extinguisher course. And the amazing thing is we had a 100% success rate. Everyone knew how to grab the fire extinguisher, they knew how to test it, and they knew how to put out the simulated fire. And we actually saw groups of people acquiring several fire extinguishers to put out the same fire. Everything that we wanted to achieve for competency, we did. And even at the end of it, they were doing buddy checks to make sure that they were safe. So in fact, the level of training and competency that they got was much higher than what the 6-hour course would ever deliver. From that date forward, I used these skills and principles on how to create training versus education, and I've been successful over and over and over again. It is very easy to bring forward a program. It can be anything. It can be safety based, it can be production based, it can be quality based. As soon as you realize what you're trying to achieve, if you're trying to achieve competency, you can actually put a proposal forward saying, hey, this is the old way, but under this new way, I'm able to save the company $300,000 on one corrective action. I'm able to save this company $300,000 for this productivity training, as long as you understand it's training. And the moment somebody tells you, well, it has to be X amount of hours, that is where you understand that idea will cause failures. And the beautiful part about these philosophies and programs is that not only are you reducing the cost, but you're actually giving a better product in a shorter amount of time. Your level of efficiency is dramatically increased. No longer will the idea be of droning through X amount of hours to get a certification so that you can go to work.